one of the things I
Mm,
think that Guam has going for it is an amazing workforce, tremendous work ethic, tremendous talent, the ability to learn new skills and apply them. Uh, I think that that's a don't don't sell that short. I Not every place has that, and if you spend any time in business around the world, you'll know exactly what I mean. Uh, I think the workforce that Guam can marshal to the problem set is really pretty amazing, and I think that's part of the special sauce that you all bring to the conversation.
Good day. It's your innovation coach, Rob Jackson, and welcome to another edition of the Innovate Guam podcast, the podcast where we explore all things innovation, technology, and improvement related to the island of Guam. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Substack. My podcasts drop at the beginning of each week. Also, be sure to check out my Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News every first and third Friday of every month. All right, I'm really excited today. Our guest today is Major General Lee K. Levy II, United States Air Force retired. He is a senior leader in large scale sustainment, logistics, and depot transformation, and is now a private sector advisor and board director working at the intersection of national security, industry, and innovation. He was a former commander of Air Force Sustainment Center, where he led a global sustainment enterprise of over 43,000 individuals across 73 locations supporting aircraft, space, and cyber systems. He was the former vice director for logistics on the Joint Staff, where he developed and managed policy for military strategic logistics and distribution at the highest levels of the Pentagon. His career assignments span aircraft maintenance, munitions, logistics, supply chain, depot maintenance, and nuclear operations. He has a BS in business administration from Louisiana State University, an MS in international relations from Troy State, has an MA in national security and strategic studies from the Naval War College, and he has a Doctor of Education, EDD degree in leadership and learning organizations from Vanderbilt University. He is currently the president and CEO of the Levy Group, LLC, advising on global security policy, supply chains, risk, and crisis management. His public service and governance involvement includes serving 3+ years on NASA's Advisory Council, and he's also been appointed to Oklahoma's Aerospace and Autonomous Systems Council. He's also a senior non-resident fellow at the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies. He's a board and industry leader, serving on multiple corporate boards as both profit and nonprofit sectors. He's also has a leadership role in the National Defense Industrial Association. Ladies and gentlemen, I give to you Major General retired Lee Levy. General Levy, welcome aboard, sir.
Well, thank you. I'm exhausted hearing that. You must be exhausted reading it. Thank you for the very kind and generous introduction. I'm not so sure that speaks of an accomplished career. I just think it speaks of many decades of trying to do good work and good service. So thank you for the warm intro, and thank you for the warm welcome, and greetings to everyone that may hear this and see this. It's really a treat to be with you.
All right, sir. We start off the podcast with a tradition here, just to kind of see where your head is at in terms of innovation. So we have a couple of icebreaker questions to kind of
You
fill
bet.
you out about innovation. So starting off, what does innovation mean to you?
So I think innovation is kind of like art. If you ask 10 people, you get 11 answers. From this airman's perspective and from this business person's perspective, innovation is doing the thing that nobody really expected you to do. Somebody once told me learning begins at the edge of discomfort. And I think
Mm,
I think innovation is somewhat analogous to that, right? It's getting out of whatever your collective comfort zone is, and this could be in a military context, a government context, an academia context, uh, not for profit, a for profit, right? I mean, it's not um, bounded by some sort of organizational construct. You have to get into your discomfort area in order to do the things that you otherwise wouldn't normally do. And I really think that's where innovation starts to flourish,
mm.
because it's very easy. Let's face it, we're all creatures of habit. It's very easy for us to say, yeah, that innovation stuff sounds kind of neat, but I kind of like this little box that I work in now, right? Or this,
Yes.
there's somebody wrote the book, and I can't remember the author, shame on me, called "Who Moved My Cheese." Uh,
Yes. Who moved my cheese? Yes.
Right. And we're all mice that way, right? We like our cheese in the same place for the most part. And so innovation requires, particularly from a leadership perspective, you having to be okay with the cheese moving, and most of the time, you being the one that moves the cheese. And that's very difficult for people to do as leaders. And it's difficult for them to do from a managerial perspective, but it's sort of difficult for them to do psychologically. But that's how I see innovation. It's getting into that place of discomfort so that you can really have change that is fundamentally different than all the things you've done in the past. And again, it's not limited to academia or military or commercial. I mean, this applies to any organization of more than two human beings. If you're by yourself, then I'm not sure that this necessarily applies. If you're, sort of an army of one, but if there are two or more people in an organization, I'm pretty confident that this applies.
Yes, absolutely. Now, sir, you've led transformation at scale in depot organizations, supply chain organizations, and various global sustainment organizations. What's the one leadership habit or operating rhythm that you found is essential to drive real change in a large, complex organization?
I would say I'm going to give you one and a half answers because I don't know that I could say it's just one thing. The first thing is it's the leader's commitment and
Mm,
communication, right? And you notice I didn't say leadership. I mean the leader, whoever that he or she is at the top of that organizational chart. Transformation and innovation doesn't occur if that leader isn't absolutely committed and is walking the walk as well as talking the talk. I've seen
yes.
numerous transformations fail in government, in the military, and I sit on a number of boards of directors of commercial firms, and I work in the private equity space, and I've seen transformations fail in both publicly held companies and I'm sorry, publicly traded companies and privately held companies because the leader of the organization wasn't as committed to it as perhaps everybody else was. So I think that's the thing. He or she it has to be the thing they think about when they wake up in the morning, all throughout the day, and when they go to sleep at night. But the second piece of that, and it's maybe two sides of the same coin, is they have to communicate about the transformation. Uh, and just
Mm,
about the time you think you've communicated until you're blue in the face, do it 10 more times. And the bigger the organization, both in terms of numbers and geographic diversity, the more you have to do it. Having led large scale transformations in some of my more senior roles as a general officer in the DoD, what I learned was you can even if I'm the visionary and I have the belief and I see the need for the change, and I can convince my immediate team, the people sort of in my zip code, if you will, that the change is necessary and good and right and proper. The half-life of that is about zero point 0.2 milliseconds once you get out of your zip code, right? So if
mm,
it's somebody who's not in your time zone or your state or your
yes.
country, as many of my organizations were, they were, it was multinational organization, that ability to communicate your vision and your transformational goals, that's almost a full-time job. And that's very difficult for a lot of leaders to understand because um, you know people are very easy to perceive that perhaps you're not committed to the transformation, and it's very easy to get pulled away by the crisis of the day,
Yes.
shareholder meetings, a meeting with a banker, the dean wants to talk to me, I've got a meeting at the Pentagon I have to go deal with, etc. All important things, don't get me wrong, and essential to running the business. Um, but if you're really serious about transforming and leading through that transformation, that's the one thing that only the leader can do. You can't subcontract that. You can't outsource that. You can't make that your chief of staff or your number two's job. That's your job as the leader of the organization. And I've seen successful transformations that have permanence and stickiness
Mm,
occur because that has gone on. And conversely, I've seen transformations not have stickiness and fall apart because that leader wasn't committed. And then the minute they left, things went back to uh, however they were prior. And that's really very disheartening, frankly, because that creates it's very much of a letdown. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. But as importantly, it's a waste of people's talent.
yes.
Human beings are
Yes.
the most precious asset we have in any line of endeavor, and we've wasted some of that asset. I'm sure you've probably at some point have been there, but if you go into the Air Force Special Operations Command headquarters in
Yes.
Herbert Field in Florida, right as you walk in the lobby of the building, there are the 10 Special Operations Forces truths, the 10 soft truths. They're on the wall, and
Yes.
the most important soft truth, and this applies
Humans
not
are
only
more
in special.
important.
Humans are more important than hardware. You nailed it. And that's it's just as true in special
Yes.
operations as it is in academia or industry or law enforcement or whatever. And so, wasting that human talent and that human goodwill, I think, is a shame if you don't lead your organization through transformation and change successfully. And oh, by the way, it becomes that much more difficult for the next person who is trying to achieve it, or the person after that, because it takes a lot more energy to get the organization excited about becoming something different tomorrow than it is today.
I love the way that you explain that with the soft truth. And I really like the analogy of half-life of communication. I really like that. I'm going to have to steal that from you, sir. Maybe I'll give you a little publishing for it.
I'm
All right.
sure
So you've worked on both.
everything I know, I've learned from others, and other leaders have imparted on me. So there's no copyright there, as far as I know. But I would say that, and you know this from your own distinguished military career, leadership is an interpersonal skill, and I don't want to say it's easy to lead with people in the room. It's easier to lead with people in the room, and the further away those people are from you in terms of miles or zip codes or time zones, the more difficult it is to have traction. And so, how you lead, the scale of the organization and physically where it's located, and those sorts of things, drive you to think of might and should drive you to think about this somewhat differently.
Innovation leaders, it's your innovation coach, Rob Jackson here. Are you ready to elevate your vehicle fleet operations? Fleet Solutions is an AI-enabled fleet management system. Fleet Solutions provides real-time video, smart analytics, and total efficiency. Keep your people safe and keep your business moving forward faster than ever before. Fleet Solutions, arriving tomorrow, today. Visit thefleetsolutions.net or call 671-988-9748 to schedule your personalized demo and revolutionize your fleet operations today. So you've worked on both sides of the coin, both in Department of Defense, now Department of War, and on industry and boards. You look at innovation today. What do you think that most leaders still misunderstand about speed, risk taking, and accountability?
Um, a couple of things. Again, I'm not sure that you could say just one thing. I think most of these things are kind of like a Rubik's cube, right? It's a cube with many colors on different sides. And as a leader, you're thinking about, how do I turn this Rubik's cube to get all the colors on each side so that I've quote unquote solved the puzzle. Uh, So
Yes.
I'll offer you a couple of thoughts about solving this leadership Rubik's Cube. One of which is um, you must have some strategic patience. Um, that's essential.
What does that look like?
Um, it looks like the ability to have faith in what you're doing and faith in the people that work with you and for you in your organization, and wait long enough for those transformations to take hold while concurrently telling the rest of the outside world, go away. We have this. We know what we're doing. We're working on this, et cetera. And you've seen this in other places. The shareholders or the investors or somebody in the
Mhm.
federal government's like, well, I'm not so sure I'm crazy about that idea. The leader has to be able to have the patience to allow the transformation to take root in the organization while telling the outside world, the external voices, if you will, just take a seat. We've got this, and we're going to be successful. I think that's one thing. The other thing is a term, and I've always known this term, but I didn't realize it until I was pursuing my doctorate. I never had learned it formally, and so I give Vanderbilt great credit for teaching me this at least one of these nuggets that I can take away with me, and that's the concept of psychological safety. Uh, we all know this
Mm,
term, particularly if we're leaders in large organizations, particularly in military or government organizations. Psychological safety is this concept that the leader uh, gives the workforce a chance to be candid and open without fear of negative consequence. And I don't mean punishment or retribution. It could be ridicule, it could be being ignored. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm afraid that I will lose my job, etc. But this notion of psychological safety, I'm safe to tell you, boss, why this is going well or this is not going well, or maybe we should do something else. And so oftentimes leaders may not understand that concept and how to create an environment that is imbued with psychological safety, so your leadership team and your team of teams and your workforce can then tell you when things are going well, when things are not going well, and as importantly, offer alternatives. Hey, we're on the right path, but if we just made a 10-degree course correction, we could do even better, right? And so I think that's another component. So psychological safety and some strategic patience, I think, are absolutely essential. And the absence of those, I think, are two major reasons why transformations don't take hold, or the workforce gives them lip service as opposed to really buying in. I'm not going to buy in if I don't feel like I can have a say in it, or I can tell my boss this is going well or this is not going well. So I think that's important. And then lastly, and the government, in my observation, has not always been as good at this as it perhaps should be, and rightfully so because of risk and taxpayer dollars. But um, somewhat the ability to accept failure. I've never seen a successful transformation
yes.
go 100% smoothly. It just doesn't happen. If it was easy, everybody would do it, and we wouldn't be having this conversation because there would be no need, right? But large-scale transformations or fundamental changes in market, or shifting how you do things in your organization, um, they have ebbs and flows, ups and downs, good days and bad days, as it were. And there will be some failure, some level of failure. It could be mission failure, performance failure, financial failure, workforce failure. Uh, in no way should there be safety failure, right? Because safety is non-negotiable, right? Nobody comes to work to get injured,
Right.
right? I mean, so that should never, that kind of failure is not tolerable in any environment whatsoever. But there has to be a little failure because there will be failure, and if you don't expect that there will be bits and pieces of failure along the way, then you probably haven't thought through your plan of how this is going to unfold. And so, as a leader, in addition to being able to create a space for psychological safety and have this strategic patience, you have to be tolerant of failure. And that goes back to the strategic patience thing as well, which is, frankly, Rob, to be able to tell your bosses, if you're the leader of the organization, everybody has a boss, shareholder, the president, someone in the DoD, someone in the university, whatever it is. You have to be able to tell them this is all part and parcel of our transformation. Uh, it'll be just fine. Remain calm. Everything will go just fine. Again, nobody fudges on safety, nor should we. But in some of these other areas, I think a little failure is inevitable and should be well tolerated. And frankly, organizations that fail and learn from their failure and I don't say celebrate failure because that's not exactly what I mean, but understand what went wrong and then build upon it and commit to doing better on the next iteration. Those organizations are really strong and they become very resilient because they can learn that, again, as long as we don't get anybody hurt or, burn the building down, so to speak, that we can have. We are a mistake tolerant and fault tolerant organization, and that creates a safe space for people to bring their best ideas to the organization every day when they come to work.
Yes, yes. So, during your career, you were deeply involved in Air Force depot transformation efforts. So, if you could talk through kind of what that looks like in terms of like some of the continuous improvement approaches like AFSO 21, better known
Mhm,
as Air Force Smart Operations for the 21st Century, and Art of the Possible. And
mhm.
then as you reflect on those depot transformation efforts, what worked, what didn't, and what were the biggest cultural barriers to those changes?
Yeah, that's kind of like a world solving world hunger question. So uh, I'll try to cover some. I'll try to cover some of that, and if I miss bits and pieces, if you'll pull me back to it, then I'd appreciate it. For our listeners, the DoD, the Department of War now, and the Air Force in particular, has been committed to continuous process improvement for decades. I mean, it seems like it's always been part and parcel of my Air Force experience. I can't remember a time where we weren't committed to it. What was less obvious and less institutionalized was that we were committed to it using a standard set of tools and processes so that so large scale organizations could change together in step, if you would, and um, they could then find common ways by which they can measure their successes or their changes. So, so you've seen that develop and become implemented. And then across the Air Force, we created this thing called Air Force Smart Ops for the 21st century, APSO 21, which was a way for us to take some of these process improvement methodologies, whether it's Lean Six Sigma, drum buffer rope, Little's Law, et cetera, and take them to parts of in our experience, in parts of the Air Force and parts of the DoD, in my broader joint experience, that didn't think that that applied to them. Interestingly enough, a lot of organizations think,
Mm,
well, I don't really have a process, so I don't need to do process improvement. I work in the finance department, or I work in the marketing department, or I work in the HR department. I'm not fixing airplanes or
right.
making cars or what have you. I'm not on a production floor or a shop floor, so I don't need all that. And I would absolutely push back against that notion. If you're doing something, anything, there
Right.
is a process. And the analogy that I use all the time is, uh, if you go to Starbucks and you order a cup of coffee, and you put cream and sugar in it, you are following a production process. And people say, "Well, I'm not making anything." Well,
Yes.
yeah, you are. You're making a cup of coffee the way you like it. Uh, and then you think about things like, well, how many steps is it for me from the front door to the order counter? Uh, what's my wait time from the minute I deliver my order to the minute I get my beverage? Was my beverage, did it meet the quality goals that I wanted? Is it hot? Is the cup full, or what have you? And then I've got to take my cup and now go over here to the cream and sugar place and do that. Well, the sugar's over here and the creamer's over there, so now I have to wander around to get my stuff.
Yes.
Wandering, waiting and watching, also known as muda or waste, right? Wasted motion. Um, so everything we do has a process, and so AFSO 21 was about trying to get the rest of the Air Force and the Department of War to think about being process oriented. Inside of the Air Force Sustainment Center, we took those concepts and put them into one document called the Art of the Possible. Wasn't really anything revolutionary. What it was, however, was putting it into one document that the organic industrial base inside of the U.S. Air Force could then refer to. Think of it as the playbook, right? The air logistics
Mm,
complexes and the supply chains and the airbase wings and the other organizations that were in or touched the sustainment center were all running plays when the ball was snapped, and sometimes we were all running the right play. Sometimes we were not all running the right play. And the art of the possible created a playbook by which the entire organization, 43,000 plus people in 73 locations, could be running plays from the same playbook. So that's really important when you think about defining processes and understanding people, parts, and processes and how they contribute to delivering something. We're all here to do something, whether it's run a company or run a university or, support the warfighter somehow. Uh, but it creates this environment by which we understand how the process is structured. We document the process, and then we measure the process, and then we figure out
yes.
inside of the process what's working well, what's not working well, and where it's working well, we don't disrupt that if we can avoid it, and then we try to find the places where there's waste or what or um, inefficiency and improve that, all with the goal of making the organization better. And so really that's sort of the journey that the Air Force and certainly the logistics community has been on for quite some time. um, I will tell you, in the modern workplace, though, there is some challenge with that. um, as you know, and I hope that your listeners and viewers know, in the military we move around a lot, right? Every couple of years we're moving to a new base, et cetera. So there's all that to say there's a constant turnover of people. So you're always having to reform your teams, reorient your
Yes.
teams, get it re-baseline your teams, if you will. And with our Department of War civilians, they move quite a bit as well. So same challenge. The civilians are moving, the military men and women are moving. And you see the same thing in industry. And it's been I knew this before in my uniform time, but I've seen it just as much in my commercial time as a commercial airman now, if you will. That industry people move around a lot too, whether they're executives or leaders in a corporation. They move quite a bit, different jobs, different roles, different locations. The workforce comes and goes. There's turnover, and so having this continuity of purpose, this unity of effort, if you will, is really a challenge.
Yes.
And so if you want to have uh, process improvement and always have an eye towards how do we do things better. It takes a lot of leadership engagement day in and day out. Because remember, if it's important to the boss, then it's important to everybody else. And the other
Right.
phrase I presume many of your listeners have heard is what gets measured is what gets done. And so if
Mm,
if the leadership in an organization is measuring the throughput or the process efficiency or the cost reductions or whatever it is, those are the things that will get accomplished. But only if the leader measures them and then the organization looks at them. And this is a way that you can create this common set of goals and metrics that moves the organization in a unified direction to deliver whatever it's supposed to do. And that could be anything from fixing fighter jets to manufacturing beanie babies in a factory somewhere. Again, this is not,
yes.
this doesn't apply to any one particular market or industry segment. And it's just as applicable to service industries as it is manufacturing industries. If you were running a hotel chain, or if you were running a H&R Block, a tax business or something like that, these concepts are just as applicable, if not more so, in the service industry universe as it is in the production or manufacturing universe. Hopefully I covered all the things you
Yes.
wanted. I know I wandered around a bit, so I
Y-
apologize.
No, you did. You did a great job with that. So it's a good segue. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the data and metrics that you use to kind of move the Air Force's sustainment organization and into that um, next step or that evolutionary improvement that you wanted to see?
Absolutely. And I'm gonna and I want to maybe give a bit of a preface before I answer, because some of our listeners may not what I'm about to say may not necessarily resonate with some of them that come from a pure industry background. Uh, in the Air Force, our job is to fly, fight, and win. And it is to fight and win our nation's wars when called upon to do so. Um, and so some of the things we do in the Air Force and the other branches of the service aren't always the most economically focused, right? It's about being warfighter ready and effective, and at the same time trying to be the best steward of the taxpayer dollars as we can possibly be. So for me, the metric, the true north metric for me was our readiness. And it was a big
Mm,
organization. We have a couple different ways we measured it. It's not your audience probably wouldn't care about that. But it's readiness. Are we ready to do what we are tasked by the government to do, by the joint force, and by the president to do, if and when called upon to do so? And from that true north readiness metric for our organization that I was very lucky enough to lead for 3+ years, all of our subordinate metrics cascaded down from that. And what I see is a lot of times organizations will build their suite of metrics and the things that they look at from a bottom up approach. And oftentimes that fails because what happens is different chunks of the organization care about different things. The
different
the
things. Yeah.
finance folks care about some stuff that the HR people don't necessarily care about, that the transportation people don't necessarily care about, et cetera, et cetera. And so you sub-optimize, and you'll hear that word a lot in large scale transformations. You sometimes end up sub-optimizing. And so if the organization has a true north metric, and then you work backwards from there, so the transportation people are doing the things they need to do to feed to that true north metric, or the marketing people or the HR people, right? That keeps everybody aligned, and helps the organization focus on the things that actually move the needle for the entire organization. um, and to me, that was the most important thing. And then making sure, the bigger the organization, the harder this is, frankly, Rob, um, is making sure that people don't wander away from that, right? Uh,
Mm,
because there
yeah.
may be a time where I sub-optimize your organization's performance for the greater good of the organization writ large. And we've all seen this, right? We're not going to buy new equipment for your organization because the equipment you have is good enough. We're going to buy equipment for this other organization because once they get it, then we can improve our readiness, and that optimizes our true north metric of delivering readiness and value for the warfighter and for the nation. And so sometimes you have to uh, not disappoint necessarily, but explain to some sub organizations inside of your entity why they won't get necessarily the support that they want, and that their metrics might suffer. But if everybody understands how the metrics are constructed and how they're deconstructed, then if your organization isn't performing that well, everybody doesn't view that as a reflection on that organization's poor performance. What they understand is we made an organizational level decision to support our true north metric, in this case readiness, and put our investment in things that absolutely would deliver exponential improvements in that outcome for us.
Yeah, that's a great point, and leads me to a question I always thought of. You being one of the Air Force's senior most sustainment leaders, was there always a tension between sustainment and new weapon system acquisition, such that most of the Air Force senior leaders and DoD senior leaders were constantly trying to put money, time, focus on acquisition of new weapon systems versus the sustainment piece of what's already been fielded?
Yeah, there was always a lot of tension there, but I would say for good reason. Uh, First of all, for quite some time now, uh, and I think General Cruiser Wilsbach, our chief, would tell you the same thing. Our Air Force is too small for what we're asking it to do. So there's this constant tension between the Air Force we have and the Air Force we need, and in between that are the things that we're doing day in and day out. And I would say, frankly, that probably applies to the entire Joint Force. I'm sure if you had a soldier, or a sailor, or a Marine, or a Guardian uh, on right now, they'd say something analogous to that. So uh, there's there's always this tension between taking care of the things we have while trying to generate enough money to buy the things we need for tomorrow, for tomorrow's fight, et cetera. And that's always the case, right? Everybody wants a car that they never have to take to the shop for an oil change. I wish it were different. I mean, but if you drive a car, it has to go get an oil change occasionally. Well, I mean, I guess it doesn't, but in a couple of years, you're not going to like the outcome when it leaves you stranded on the side of the road. So, so, and nobody wants to pay for an oil change if they don't have to, right? And
Right.
in the DoD, the Department of War, again, it's the same for the Navy as it is for the Air Force or anybody else. We don't want to spend a penny more on sustainment than we have to because that takes money away from modernization. So there's always this tension, and the problem gets more amplified when the weapon systems get older and older. Right. The amount of money you spend to
Mm,
maintain a 2-year-old car is a lot different than what you spend to maintain a 20-year-old car. It's just simple.
yes.
20-year-old cars are cranky and creaky. They act up in ways you don't expect. And they often give you headaches when you really are late for work or something like that. And so that means time you didn't want to invest and money you didn't want to spend, but you got to have the car. So you get it into the shop and you get it fixed. There's somewhat of an analog there, right? And the older the car, the more it demands in terms of time and money. While you'd really like to be saving money to buy a new car so you didn't have to worry about the old car. So that's the dilemma the that our leadership has faced for quite some time. And you can look back at uh, any one of a number of our chiefs of staff. They've all said very much the same thing. Our service secretaries have said that this is not a new phenomenon that we've had to encounter. Um, but I'm in the same boat with them, right? I don't want to spend a penny more on sustaining platforms than I have to. I don't,
Right.
because that's money I'm not doing something else with. Uh, I'm either not buying a new airplane, I'm not building a new daycare center for the uh, kids of our airmen, and that need daycare, or I'm not redoing the runway, repaving the runway, or whatever. That money has another place it could go if I wasn't using it to sustain airplanes. But that said, remember this: our job in the Department of War is to be effective first and efficient second. Um, the
Mm,
nation expects us to be ready when
great
called
point.
upon. Right. Efficiency is important, and I certainly wouldn't want anyone to hear me say anything other than that. It is important. It's taxpayer dollar, and it's money that the department can use in other places. But the expectation is that we will be ready to go when called upon, and that means you have to sustain your weapon systems, and that costs money. Within that construct, though, I want to be as efficient with that money as I can, and spend as little sustaining the weapon systems to make sure they meet the readiness levels that our Air Force requires of us, that our Joint Force requires of us, and that our nation requires of us. So I can return, hopefully, fingers crossed, if we're doing our jobs right, extra money back to the Air Force to do things, whether it's again military construction, buy new airplanes, put satellites in orbit, whatever the case may be. So that's so is there attention? Yes. Should there be attention? Yes. It's also a way for the system to keep itself honest of sorts, right? It's like two
Mm,
arms of a balanced scale if you think about it, right? If either one of them gets too far out of whack, the scale is very tipped to one end. What you want is this conversation that occurs between the Air Force we want and the Air Force we have, and the best utilization of the dollars we have. And that will always go on. the, I will tell you that having a modern Air Force designed to meet near peer threats, peer and near peer threats, and in a 21st century high end fight, that kind of Air Force is not inexpensive. And I'm old enough to remember, I served the first part of my career during the Cold War, and I was in Europe when the wall came down, and so I had the benefit of maybe a few extra gray hairs and a little bit longer memory. But we had a fairly large department and a fairly large Air Force, and then at the peace dividend post Cold War, we sort of drew some of that down, and then 9/11 occurred, and the nation spent 20 plus years. Trying to counter violent extremist organizations, and that really changed the construct of our military force structure, both in terms of people, in terms of hardware, and in terms of doctrine with respect to what we did, how we fought, how we trained, how we exercised. That was across everybody. That's not just an Air Force comment. That's in the entire
Hmm.
national security structure. And in years of late, we have come back to the understanding that you have to be ready to fight high-end fights as well as counter VEO fights as well. And a high-end fight requires a high-end capability that's very expensive to buy and very expensive to maintain. That's just the price of freedom, and that's the price of deterrence.
Mm. So this is a good transition into kind of the next segment, looking at modernization and innovation and defense
Mhm.
acquisition, right? So the White House issued an executive order in April of last year focused on modernizing defense acquisition and spurring innovation in the defense industrial base. Um, from your perspective, what does good look like when acquisition reform is real and not just rhetoric?
First of all, it's like any large scale transformation. It has to have leadership engagement and leadership backing the workforce, the acquisition workforce, and the contracting workforce. Everybody that's in that system. And that was me. I was in that system as well because I own the supply chain and we would buy lots and lots of things, et cetera. So it has to have sustained leadership support. Um, the and you're starting to see some of this in some of the EOs and some of the other things that have been promulgated of late. Things like changing the contracting rules, things like changing the financial rules. I work in this chapter of life on corporate boards, and I own a couple of companies, and I try to help other companies where I can, and those sorts of things. There, and what I'm telling you is a cautionary tale about what happens if we get this wrong. First of all, America is a nation, and our national security is built on small business and small business innovation. Uh, that if you look at
Mm,
any of the really amazing game-changing technologies that we've brought into the national security arena, almost all of them have started in somebody's proverbial garage. Uh, and that's really important. Now they may eventually get bought by a bigger company or what have you, and then it ends up being uh, part of a larger defense establishment, and there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, that's how we advance the system. But what we would really like to be able to do and need to do, I think it's essential, particularly in the kind of global context that we live in today, is be able to have those companies bring their best ideas and be able to have the government buy from them, right? That's how you get from idea to execution much more quickly. You really compress that OODA loop, right? That observe, orient, decide, act OODA loop cycle of I
yes.
see a technology I want and I can incorporate it into something that helps us be a safer nation. Uh, and what a number of companies have told me, for example, is we have this great idea. We'd really like to sell it to the Department of War. We think the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Space Force, Coast Guard could really use this. It's a really game-changing technology or piece of software. But goodness gracious, the federal acquisition regulations and some of the bureaucracy, the accounting rules, the
Yes.
certified pricing, the TINA rules, which just got waived. We'd have to totally redo our accounting methodology, and we'd have to go hire another accountant, or we'd have to have a separate set of books, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a variety of things that small businesses can't and won't do. if you're only three or four people, and the CEO is also the HR person, is also the finance person, is also taking out the trash and also making the coffee, right? They are not going to go hire somebody, and change their accounting system just so they can meet the federal accounting requirements that get often get put on these folks. And so they say, well, I'd love to sell to you, but I can't. It's too hard. It's too painful. I'm going to go sell to the commercial space, and maybe in 5 or 10 years, I'll come back to the government and sell back after I've made a little money somewhere else. We don't have that kind of time anymore, Rob. Our adversaries are outpacing us in terms of innovation and deployment of new capabilities. Uh, the one of our adversaries, potential adversaries, basically copied one of our high-end fighters. Now, they went from
Mm,
getting the design to building their first flying prototype in about 18 months, uh, because they use a command
mm.
economy, right? If I'm the leader of that country, I can say, okay, defense establishment, here's your money. Go build me an airplane right this minute. As you know, our system isn't quite that agile. And so what's happening is our adversaries are out innovating and out fielding us at a pace that makes me, frankly, a little uncomfortable. And so moving this acquisition system along and removing a variety of hurdles, and we could probably do hours on this topic alone. And the goal is not to make your audience an expert on the arcane rules of the government acquisition system, because they would all fall asleep in no time. But what is really important for us to understand is that if we don't go faster, uh, we will get outmaneuvered by those who wish to do us harm. And that's
Yes.
not alarmist. It's just simply the fact that we live in, and um, that's part of the challenge of an open market economy. It's a part of a challenge of democracy. And I'm not advocating for any other kind of form of government. It's the most amazing form of government that humankind has ever invented. But that said, we have to understand where the risks lie from those who might not be as enthusiastic about democracy and open markets as we are.
Yes. So public-private partnerships, they're a big part of
Yeah.
acquisition, modernization, acquisition, um, innovation, particularly in the sustainment aspect of the acquisition enterprise. Can you tell me about what you've seen done right, as well as some common failures modes that you've seen when public-private partnerships are either poorly designed or well designed?
Right. Gosh, we could probably do another several-hour show just on that. A couple things. I think if you if you've seen one public-private partnership, you've seen exactly one public-private partnership. I've never seen two that are the same. Everyone has been different than every other one, and it's based on a whole bunch of things. First of all, the most important thing is the government has to know what it wants, right?
Yes,
And sometimes we're not always as good at that as we ought to be. And part of that is because, for example, we don't know uh, where the world is going to take us in 3 years or 5 years. And businesses that want to establish public-private partnerships are looking for long-term arrangements that give them certainty and decrease risk. When a business feels risk, it drives up price. When it doesn't feel risk or feels less risk, prices come down. You create stability. Pretty simple economic concept. Every business I've ever come across operates pretty much the same way in that regard. But in the business of national security, it's hard for us to know what's going to happen in 3, 5, 7 years from now. Uh, Maybe we'll still be flying this airplane. Maybe we're going to not fly that airplane, or we're going to change the radar on it or the engine or the landing gear or something. And those don't always play well in the public private partnership arena. So knowing what we want and how long we're going to operate a system, I think is really important for us to pick which thing we want to do public private partnerships on. So that's one point that I would make. Um, the other thing I would say that we have to understand across the entire defense industrial base, both the organic and commercial industrial base, is what does the industrial base for this look like, right? Is there a robust industry? Are
Mm,
there three or four vendors? Is there maybe only one person who does this thing, make this thing or fix this thing? Uh, do we do it in perhaps only one organic repair facility, maybe at Tinker or Hill Air Force Base or Warren Robins, or maybe at the Navy Fleet Repair Center in Jacksonville or at North Island at San Diego? Maybe we only do it at one place. Maybe we do it at two or three. Maybe the Marines are doing their own thing and the Air Force is doing its own thing and the Navy's doing its own thing, and we're duplicating. So it's understanding, what does the market look like? What does the health of that industrial base look like? And should we even do a public-private partnership? There are times where
mm,
I think it's better that if we already have the in situ capability in the organic system, and it's not dislodging other more important work that it needs to do, leave it alone. Kind of the case of, if it isn't broken, don't try to fix it. Conversely, if there's a very healthy
mm,
commercial industrial base, and the sustainment ecosystem is satisfied that the industrial base is pretty good, maybe we should leave that alone. Public-private partnerships really work best for systems and components where there's not really good industrial base necessarily, and maybe not a really great organic industrial base universe either. And this is a way to sort of combine capabilities where where the whole is more than the sum of the parts. So I think that's how we pick who we want to take to the dance in terms of public-private partnerships. I think is really, really important, and we don't always get that right. And then everybody gets a little bit disappointed over time. Not everybody, but the participants in that get a little disappointed over time. The second thing is uh, understanding the financial risks. Uh, Businesses have a different financial tempo, different cadence financially than the government does. Um, and they aren't always aligned. They have shareholders, they have investors that they have to satisfy. The government obviously does too. It's called the taxpayer, it's called Congress, et cetera. But the tempo at which those two cycles evolve don't move at the same pace. So understanding who does what to whom financially and when, I think is really, really important. I can think of a couple of examples in my time where the agreement was not well written, and a huge amount of financial risk was handed to the U.S. government. Uh,
mm.
and the partner, the commercial partner, was very happy with that. Right, that's financial risk that they didn't have to take on. They were happy to let the then DoD take that risk on, and to my knowledge, nothing bad ever happened financially, but it certainly could have. So part of this, I think, is a function of both partners. If you really want it to be a partnership and not a one-way relationship, both partners have to have equal amounts of upside and downside in the relationship. Upside in terms of profit or readiness, and downside in terms of risk exposure, whether that's reputational risk, readiness risk, and or financial risk. Never safety risk. So
Okay.
let
So
me just bang that drum again. There's nothing worth getting anybody hurt over.
yes. So for Guam specifically, ship repair and maritime sustainment are huge opportunities. What agree ingredients would you say are required to build a credible public-private partnership ecosystem between the Department of War, industry, and now you've got the territorial government, the government of Guam. How can we kind of build a partnership from these three entities in order to drive a successful ship repair and maritime sustainment ecosystem um,
Yeah.
in Guam and throughout the Marianas?
So I think that the Guam is in the catbird seat right now. I mean, I think they're in a great position to be a great value add to the Department of War and to the nation writ large because of its strategic geographic location and its amazing workforce. So I think it's a good time to be on Guam, right, as it were. Um, but having said that, I think the how do we take that um, those ingredients and turn that into a successful public-private partnership ship repair enterprise, I think my initial response is figure out what needs to be done first. In other words, what is the problem that the Navy has? Uh, Sometimes what I see happen is entities will come to the DOW and they'll say, "We have a really good capability to do X, and we want to do a public-private partnership with you." That's great, but I really don't need I don't need X to get fixed. I need Y to get fixed. That's
Mm,
my problem. And I won't speak for the Navy, of course, but or the Marine Corps or the Merchant Marine or anybody else. But let's try to understand what's really keeping the Navy and the maritime enterprise awake at night. Is it propulsion? Is it steering gear? Is it hull welding? Is it steam fitting? Is it retrofitting for advanced weapon systems like radars and things like that? I don't know, and the Navy will probably have a couple of different answers depending on if you're talking, support ships versus surface combatants, et cetera. But my point there is, let's figure out what's keeping the Navy awake at night, and then let's build our team inside of on the island and in the Marianas to support the thing or a couple of things that is a problem for them. So that's thing one. Somebody once told me a long time ago when I was a youngster in the Air Force, uh, it's all about the requirement. Uh, and
mm,
you got to know what's the
yeah.
requirement. What is the Navy or the Marine Corps, et cetera? What's their requirement? Gosh, we're really just getting beat up over this thing not working, or I can't get it repaired, or it takes twice as long as I need, or I have to send it back to the states, or flying people from the states to do it, from the CONUS. Um, so I think that's thing one. Thing two is have an unrelenting focus on the workforce. Uh, One of the things I
Mm,
think that Guam has going forward is an amazing workforce, tremendous work ethic, tremendous talent, the ability to learn new skills and apply them. Uh, I think that's a don't don't sell that short. I Not every place has that, and if you spend any time in business around the world, you'll know exactly what I mean. Uh, I think the workforce that Guam can marshal to the problem set is really pretty amazing, and I think that's part of the special sauce that you all bring to the conversation. And then I would say that behind that, kind of standing behind that workforce, there has to be a VOTech, career tech, technical schools. Every place calls it something a little bit different. Uh, uh, Learning ecosystem that creates and sustains the workforce, right? People
yeah.
people don't grow up knowing how to be a welder, right? So they learn that somewhere, et cetera. People don't grow up learning how to be an aircraft mechanic. They learn that somewhere, right? So having that ecosystem that creates and nurtures and advances those capabilities, I think is really important. And the reason I bring that up is uh, those things are hard to create and take a while to produce, to bear fruit, right? Uh, it, it- you know,
Yes.
it's not one of those things you can build a building in 12 or 18 months. You can't build an educational system and a workforce in 12 to 18 months. That is absolutely a strategic imperative that drives success or failure for many locations. So I think that those are a couple of things I think that I would offer to your listeners in terms of how um, we can be best partners with the U.S., with the federal government, the DOW more specifically, and the maritime forces even more specifically. But it all starts with the requirement, Rob. What's eating the Navy's lunch, as it were, and let's try to get to solving those things first, not not just the things we know we can do today. And maybe that requires us to stretch. Maybe that requires us to learn some new skill sets or run a couple of plays that weren't in our previous playbook. But again, if you want to transform, that's all going to start right where discomfort begins.
Yes, yes, yes. So that's a great segue to workforce development and community partnership. So let's talk about workforce development. You know,
Yes, sir.
your experience in sustaining a depot enterprise, and it requires trades. It requires
Yes.
engineers, logisticians, IT, quality, safety, everything. You know, what workforce development models have you seen that actually move the needle at scale?
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, I'll go back to something I said maybe at the beginning of our conversation this evening, which was this is leaders' business. This isn't outsourced to the HR folks or the workforce development shop. This is leader business. Uh, I mean, you and I have heard the term growing up. That's commander's business. Commander should be involved in this. And workforce development is commander's business. It's leader's business. It's CEO business. It's not something you just hand off to somebody to go do and then report back to you once a quarter. That's thing one. Thing two, in my mind, is it requires a vertical approach, right? In my last couple of big enterprise jobs in uniform, I had people from all walks of life, from welders and sheet metal technicians all the way up to PhDs in chemistry. We had scanning electron microscopes, for Pete's sakes, you know. So the workforce required a whole variety of different kinds of skill sets, you know, from trades all the way up through advanced degrees. And leaders have to understand what those skills are that are necessary, and then partner robustly with the learning institutions that can deliver that. And uh, there's a component to this that I think that a lot of leaders don't necessarily pick up on. It's not just that I partner with the learning institutions, whether it's the trade school or the university or what have you, but you also have to partner with local governments, right? Whether it's a city council, a county council,
Mm,
state legislature, state governors, state departments of education, economic development. Every place is a little bit different, so I don't. There's not a one size fits all answer. But the leader of the organization can't just partner with the educational outlets. You have to partner with the governments as well to do two things: to make sure that the funding is robust and healthy, and where needed, that there are increases in resourcing that are necessary. And I'll give you a really good case in point from personal experience. When I took over the Sustainment Center, at Tinker Air Force Base, we have huge software engineering organization, and we couldn't hire enough software engineers. Industry was gobbling them up as fast as they could, as fast as the university system could produce them. They were hiring them in their sophomore year. You know, hey, just graduate and you got a guaranteed job at these incredible salaries, and the government just couldn't compete. And the state of Oklahoma was struggling to produce the number of engineers that we needed. And I had a chat with the then governor and said, look, I could hire every engineer the state produces and still have empty chairs at Tinker Air Force Base. And then I went and I talked to
mm,
Oklahoma State University, Burns Hargis, who was the president at the time, and Dave Bourne, who was president of OU. And I sort of laid out this problem set and what my demand signal was, what their supply looked right. It's supply and demand, right? What my demand was, what their supply was, and it wasn't just me, right? Because I wasn't the only person hiring. There are a lot of other companies in Oklahoma that were hiring, a lot of people across the country that were hiring Oklahoma graduates. And so we partnered together with these institutions to increase the output of these necessary skills that we needed. But it wasn't just enough for the presidents of the university to say, I got it, I'm with you, I'll help you. Then we had to go side by side to speak to people in the executive branch, people in the legislative branch, to make sure that the resourcing was adequate and sustained.
hmm.
You can't do it for one or two cycles. It has to be sustained so that we
Right.
could start to move the needle. And I will tell you, Rob, that during the time that I was in that position, I never saw one extra engineering graduate from those universities, not because they weren't trying, but because it doesn't happen instantaneously, right? They had to recruit more students, they had to hire faculty, they had to get students in and get them through the pipeline, and then get them diplomas, et cetera. All of these things take time, and so good leaders understand this, and they work with the educational outlets and they work with the government to make sure that this kind of production. This is a production machine, right? It's a process, that this process is
Yes.
laid out, and that we've put in all the right components so that we can produce what we need to support, in this case, the economy of Guam, the warfighter, in my case, the U.S. Air Force during my time in that particular job, et cetera. So it's complex and it's complicated.
Yes. Yes. So, what advice would you have to um, industry, Department of War, and government of Guam if they wanted to, over the next uh, coming years, to um, push this pipeline? First, design and develop this pipeline, but what are the top kind of workforce roles and skill clusters that they should really focus on, or things that they need to focus on to create the pipeline?
Yeah, well, that's a couple of different questions embedded in there. Uh, the uh, Again, we could probably do several hours on that. I think that the first thing I would say is, go on a bit of a listening tour. Uh, I would say if I were the government of Guam or the economic development folks, et cetera, I would go spend some time with the DOW. And I know, having been to Guam a number of times, I know that I'm sure this has sort of already happened, but figure out what it is that the Navy principally, because they, and that's kind of the big consumer, where their shortfalls are. Maybe it's welders. I don't want to speak for the Navy, of course, but maybe it's welders, and then work backwards into creating a training pipeline that delivers what the Navy needs. That's really my number one advice. I've seen a lot of states in my time create an educational system for the DoD that it thought the DoD wanted, but it wasn't what the DoD needed. It might have been something they needed 15 years ago,
Mm,
but that's not what they need for today or for 10 years from now. So I think making sure that there's alignment between what the Department of War needs, with the government and industry leaders on the island, I think that's job one. Because then we know
yes.
we're building the system to support what the customer needs, right? Uh, you may remember Henry Ford once said, when he was building the Model T, he said, "You can have the Model T in any color you want as long as it's black." Because he was only making them in black. That's the only paint he had. Well, somebody came along and said,
That's right.
the customer might want a red one or a blue one or a green one, and so they started painting them different colors because that's what the customer wanted. So I think that, to me, that's one of the must do elements on the front end of this. And then I really think there has to be some state and territorial leadership involvement on a regular basis, to keep all of the different entities moving in the same direction. Right. We talked about transformation and how it requires leadership involvement. This is akin to that in my mind. Make sure that the educational system's working right, to make sure that the K through 12 system is working right, to make sure that the relationship with the federal government is working right, et cetera. I think that has to also be in place for this to be effective, and it has to be a long-term commitment. I really think that if you take a strategic mindset and a long-term approach, this works a lot better than if you say, "I'm just going to do this for 3 years and we're going to solve this problem and then go into something else." Rarely, rarely does that yield the result that you think it will.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that's great advice. So, looking out 5 to 10 years, what does success look like for defense sustainment and the industrial base modernization in Indo Pacific, from your humble opinion?
Yeah, your crystal ball is probably about as good as mine, probably better than mine. But from my somewhat murky crystal ball, I think sustainment will involve a couple of things in the Indo-Pacific arena. A lot more focus on autonomy, autonomous ships, planes, surface, subsurface vessels. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that's been paying attention for the past couple of years. Um, But I think certainly the Air Force, the Department of War is getting serious about autonomy in a way that it hasn't, previously. And I don't just mean combat drones. I mean things that perform sustainment functions like logistics, resupply, fueling, et cetera. I think that's going to be a key element of the sustainment ecosystem. And Guam could certainly have a part to play in sustaining the sustainers. So think about it
Yes.
from that way, sustaining the sustainers. The other thing I think that you're going to see a lot more of, again, this should not come as a surprise to anybody, is a lot more surface maritime presence in the first and second island chain. That's going to drive a need for, pardon me, uh, in situ repair as opposed to having to take a ship all the way from Guam back to somewhere else uh, to fix it. So I think that's going to be a sustainment opportunity that's going to yield the, some benefit. To include, by the way, we tend to think of gray hulls when we talk sustainment for maritime, but
Yeah.
the Department of War rents and leases a fair number of
Yes.
commercial ships too, and they need things too. So partnering with things like the Maritime Sea Lift Command, et cetera, I think is also really important to being able to tap into supporting and sustaining the commercial shipping industry that supports the Department of War, not just the military ships themselves.
Yes. Yes. Well, wow, General Levy, thank you so much for, this incredible conversation and sharing your insights on everything from sustainment to technology to process improvement, and wrapping that into opportunities for Guam and Micronesia. I think we learned a lot here. I think for my audience, I hope you were inspired and learned a lot listening. I certainly did. Uh, be sure to follow, like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to check out my Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News every first and third Friday of each month. See you next time. And remember, whether at work, at home, or at play, always innovate. Thank you.